everyone, I'm Arlene Dickinson. Thanks for joining me on my podcast. I have been a longtime partner of TELUS because I value the support they provide to both local businesses and entrepreneurs. Recently, TELUS launched Stand With Owners. It's an initiative that's targeted to support Canadian small businesses during COVID-19 because now more than ever, we could all use a bit of help. And that's why TELUS and I have partnered to provide all of my listeners with an exclusive limited time offer. Right now, if you bring your business to TELUS, you can receive 20% off a mobility plan for business, and you also get the first 3 months free. That's right, free. Visit TELUS.com/reinvention to redeem this offer. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Reinvention. And today I'm talking to Hayley Wickenheiser. Hayley is an incredible athlete. She's an advocate for health. She's an amazing woman and an amazing Canadian. She defines reinvention. She's an Olympic multi-gold medalist. She's considered to be the greatest female hockey player of all time. I think she's the greatest hockey player of all time. She's also an incredible softball player. I bet you didn't know she's a student at med school now, and she's a mom. She is the epitome of hard work and resiliency, and I'm delighted to have talked with her. Take a listen. So Hayley, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today about a little bit about reinvention, about what's going on in the world, and your thoughts in general about a number of topics. I'm really looking forward to diving in with you on all of that.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Arlene. Happy to do this.
Where am I talking to you from?
I'm in Toronto. Yeah.
You're in Toronto right now. Mm-hmm. Calgary girl misplaced in Toronto. Is that what's happening here?
Basically, yeah. I've been stuck here ever since COVID hit. No, I was doing some rotations and finishing medical school at the University of Calgary, and I work for the Leafs as well. So, been going back and forth. And when COVID hit, I just decided this was the place I would hunker down for now. But we'll see how long it lasts.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, listen. As I think about the conversation, in terms of what I want to speak to you about, as I said earlier, like you're an accomplished softball player. I mean, I've been doing some homework on you and reading up about some of the things you've done, and I got to talk about reinvention. I mean that, and then gold and multiple gold time medal winner in hockey. You were the first female hockey player to play without being a goalie. Is that correct? Is that have I got that right?
Yeah, to play professional men's hockey overseas. Yeah, I sure was. Yeah.
And then you went from that. So you had a softball career, you had the hockey career, then you became then you started, as you said, you're working with the Maple Leafs in the role that you've got there. You've been a philanthropist and are an amazing philanthropist. You've started WickFest. You've done so much. Like, I don't even know, actually, it's rare that I'm sitting here in an interview and I actually don't even know where to start in thinking about how many times you have reinvented yourself. Or maybe let's start there. Mm-hmm. Is it reinvention that you've done, or have you just expressed yourself as you learned and grew? You found ways to demonstrate what you're learning and growing as, and translated it into business adventures and career development. Like, tell me how you did all this.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I guess it's a bit of both. I mean, I think like when I was younger, I grew up in Saskatchewan in a very small town, and my parents were teachers. So life revolved around the community and the rink. And, that's just how we grew up. Everybody lived outside, and you're always living, with other people in mind. That's how you kind of survived in a community. So I think as I played softball and I played hockey at the same time, that's what we did in small towns at that time. And then my hockey career sort of took off, and that was my life and had been my life for a long time. And then I think what happens as you move through a career, you have to start, one of the things as a female athlete is that when I started playing hockey, I was always thinking about life after hockey. And I think a lot of professional male athletes, they don't have the same outlook because they're making millions of dollars. So you don't think about, what am I going to do after as much. And so for me, because my background with my parents, they were always, harping on, get an education, set yourself up. And so as I was in one foot in one career, I was actively thinking about other things. And so that's where WICFest came from sort of in the last 10 years of my career. I started thinking about a way to give back and leave a bit of a legacy. And then, moving into the other business ventures and then moving into medical school was just sort of a natural transition. So I guess I've always been aware of, and I'm a little bit ADHD. I can't really do one thing for a long time. I get a little bored. So the other thing too, is I was really at a young age, I started on the national team when I was 15, and I was playing with women who were like 35. My first roommate on the national team was a grade 10 math teacher, and I was a grade 10 math student. So if you can imagine, that was pretty weird for her to have a 15-year-old roommate. But what I learned from these women who are like professional people is that they were able to have a life outside of just being an athlete and a hockey player. And so I always kind of grew up with this like balanced approach. And so I think that's why I've been able to do other things and I've wanted to do other things. It's just that I have a lot of interest. So I think reinventing yourself is a really important aspect of life, because we can't be one thing forever, really, in the end of the day. So yeah, that's a little bit of how that all came about.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, your parents were both phys ed teachers, correct?
They both taught phys ed, but my dad was math science as well. And my mom was elementary. Yeah.
So he did both. So he taught math science but sports was obviously a big piece of his life as he taught phys ed too. And then your mom taught phys ed. Is that what you grew up with? So you grew up with a sports highly active family. Do you think that played a big influence in your choices in life?
I think so. The one thing about my parents is people, might think my parents were really hard driving, but my mom and dad are I'm crazy hard driving, but I think my parents are the opposite. In fact, there were many times growing up where my parents would say, are you sure you want to keep playing this hockey? It's getting hard. You're the only girl. And they didn't really like, conflict, and they would sort of protect me from all that was going on. But they never pushed us. I have a younger brother and sister, and my parents, all they said to us as kids was, we don't care what you do, but you have to be active and do something. And so my mom really modeled that. She taught aerobics in town and was very, very active. And my dad coached and did all sorts of things. But one of the things that they would do is, being teachers, we'd go to the school on the weekend. My dad would open up the gym, and we'd just pull out all of the phys ed equipment, like the trampolines and the ropes, and we'd play for hours, just a ton of different sports in the gym, all of us neighborhood kids. And then my dad would close the gym and we'd go home. And so I was fortunate to kind of grow up in that active environment, but I never felt pressured to be an athlete or to play hockey or to try to make the Olympics. It was kind of the opposite. So it's probably why it helped me, is because they were so non-invasive that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think about my dad and my family, my parents. My dad was a teacher as well. He was an educator and was all about kind of self-paced learning. And he taught electronics in his early days, and then went on to build an entrepreneurial company to help people learn at their own pace. But he taught at university level, and he was, it was always about learning more than it was about physical activity in our home. Mm-hmm. And I often wonder if we'd had more kind of exposure to that. My parents just weren't that physically active that way. And so I never was really exposed to sports. I mean, I went to school and there was sports there, and I did some sports there, but I listened to you and I think, that would have been really interesting when you talk about your dad closing the gym and doing all those things. That must have been a really great childhood from that perspective, to be exposed to, the physical side of life as well as the intellectual side of what you can do through education.
Yeah, looking back, I think we were pretty lucky. When we grew up on a street, we had 30 kids on our street, in our neighborhood. So we had a built-in hockey team and a built-in, everybody was outside, and we lived outside all the time, 5-6 hours a day. So it was a pretty perfect, upbringing in that regard, that we weren't rich, but we had everything that we needed. Right. So that was, from that regard, I would feel very grateful. And to have come from a small town too, where you didn't worry about, your kids would just leave for hours on end, and you just knew when you opened the back door and yelled supper that everybody would just come home. And I feel, that was nice. It's not really like that anymore, but it was nice to grow up in that environment.
Now, when you think about that, though, and you think about being that age and you were, playing with your friends and doing the things that you were doing, at what point did you start to realize, or who realized and recognized in you the skill you had in, let's start with softball and then maybe go to hockey, because I'm curious, did you understand it yourself, or were you encouraged by people around you? Did you have mentors that pushed you? Did you, you talked about the teacher that was, roomed with you and that actually gave you some guidance, but what was it that actually started to, you saw, this is it, this is what I want to do?
Well, I remember, I kind of will put hockey and softball together, because what it was like was in the winter we played hockey, and then in the summers we would throw our skates away and we would play softball. And now kids play one sport all year round, which I think is just not a good idea at all. So I was fortunate, and that was just our life. And I think I grew up in a community where a lot of so first of all, you were a body to fill a team. So they were happy to have me, even though I was a girl and playing with the boys a lot of times. And so I didn't feel that sort of shade or negativity until we moved to Calgary, actually. And I started playing at a more competitive older age. But there were certain people in our community. One of them was a farmer. His name's Ken Billington, and he's just as you would imagine, an old redneck rancher who'd show up with his cowboy boots and his hat, and you would think he would be the last person to want to let a girl play hockey. But he was one of the ones that really kind of propped me up in my town and said, no, like, she's a good player, like, she's got places to go. And there were other community leaders and coaches that did the same in my town. And so I remember at a young age, like I was 9 or 10, I would practice writing my autograph. And I dreamed that I was going to play for the Edmonton Oilers and go to Harvard Medical School. Those were my two dreams. And I don't know where they came from. I loved the Oilers. And my dad and I would watch Hockey Night in Canada, and we would watch Gretzky and Messier. And then I would try to go onto the outdoor rink behind our house and practice what I saw Wayne and Mark doing on the ice. And that's really how I learned how to play the game. And I had a pure love, I think, for the game. And as I got older, it was probably about 12-ish, I started to realize, okay, I was good for my age group. And then I played on the Canada Games team, and that was my first experience with high level hockey. And from there, the rest is kind of history. The national team came calling, but it was never something that I set out with a goal to do. I just played it. I played sports because I love them. And I think when you do something for the pure joy and love of it, it takes you a lot further than doing as a job, you know what I mean? Or as a means to an end. So it was a very organic evolution for me.
I think that's true, but I do think that sometimes, people say, well, follow your passion, but I actually think I'm more of the lean more towards the follow your purpose. If you can find purpose, then the passion, I actually think, comes from the purpose. Like I don't know what do you think of that? Like, you found purpose in your life because you had these aspirational goals. You wanted to go to Harvard Medical School. You wanted to play in a professional hockey team. And so is that passion or is that purpose? Was your purpose to try and make a difference in the world? Was your purpose to play sports? I mean, what was it?
Yeah, I always say that I think I was born to play hockey. And I think that hockey and sport is the vehicle by which I've been able to do any good that I've done in my life, I guess. So I feel that in a way, it was a purpose. It was a calling for me to do what I've done. Just like I think, medicine is in a way, the same thing. And it's, not lost on me that I had those two dreams. When I was very young, I saw there was a young girl in our neighborhood. She got run over by a grocery delivery van in the town, and she lived. But I remember going to the hospital for weeks on end with all the kids in my neighborhood, and we were watching how the doctors and nurses treated her. And I remember being so inspired by that I wanted to do that. That was sort of simultaneously. So I think things happen in our life for a reason, and certainly, very, very much a purpose or finding your purpose allows you to, I guess, live the passion that I think we all have inside of us if it's unlocked and we're able to really be who we are.
But if you want to circle back to what you said, you made a comment about you were playing on all boys teams until you were, I think, 13 years old, is what you said. And then it wasn't until you went up into the leagues that you started to really think about the fact you were a girl playing on men's teams or boys teams at the time. tell me how you got through that, because I think people listening are going to say, yeah, you had this purpose and all these things and you were born to be a hockey player, but you still had to overcome a lot of self-doubt. I mean, there had to be times, I think you used the word shame. You had to be times where you went, wait a minute, why should I do this? Everybody's making fun of me, or, telling me I don't belong. Or did you go through any of that?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I could probably write a book on all these traumatic experiences. And it's interesting. I think back now and of those times, and it's only sort of now that I'm starting to realize so many things that I went through that were just so wrong that happened to me. And quite frankly, it was a lot of abuse and harassment, if I think about it. But at the time, I just thought that was what I had to endure in order to do what I wanted to do. So I remember very vividly, I wanted to go to this hockey school in Regina, and it was an all boys hockey school. And so they allowed me to come to the hockey school, but it was a boarding school and there was nowhere for a girl to sleep. It was the Regina Agrodome where the Regina Pats play in the Western Hockey League. And, so they said, well, we'll let you come, but we don't have a place for you to sleep because it's all boys. So you could sleep in this usher's closet. And they actually opened this usher's closet. And my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, felt so bad that I was sleeping literally under coat hangers in this closet. He pulled his sleeping bag in, and he and I, for a week, we slept on the foamies on the floor in this usher's closet. And, at the time I was so happy to just be at this hockey school. And I was just so excited to be on the ice every day. But when I look back now, I'm thinking oh my God, that was a very traumatic experience to have to endure. But I got to almost immune to it because it happened so much. And back, 25 years ago when I was playing as a young girl, that was just what you had to endure. So I've changed in boiler rooms and bathroom stalls, and I've had things thrown at me on the ice, and I've had parents say the most awful things. And in fact, when I was in Bantam AAA in Calgary, I was playing for the AA Bruins, it was called, out of the Northwest. And I remember I actually developed an ulcer that year not because I was so afraid to play hockey and get hit by the boys. It was the stress that I had to endure of going to the rink, and I would have to change in the lobby bathrooms of all these community rinks in Calgary. And then I'd have to walk through the lobby of all the parents and listen to them hurl insults at me as a 14, 15-year-old girl. So that is what was stressful. But the place that I felt really safe is when I stepped on the ice. And I really believed in my heart of hearts that no one could touch me there because I was a good player. And that's what kind of kept me going and gave me my my peace and it was my sanctity. But everything else around it, I hated it as a kid because it was so hard. So when I look back, I'm grateful now because I think it made me really resilient. And there's not a lot that anyone can say or do to me that I feel that I can't handle because of those experiences now.
Yeah, that's very interesting as well. I keep saying that, but it's, to me, I listen to you and I think, I often get asked similar types of questions about what was it like to be a female entrepreneur when nobody else was. There weren't very many female entrepreneurs at all. I mean, when I was starting out many decades ago now, and I didn't really pay attention to all the negativity and the pushbacks and the horrible things. And there were things done and said that when I look back at them now, I go, wow, was completely offside and that should never have happened. But at the time I was just so intent on doing what I needed to do. And I didn't ever consider myself, because I was a female or, a young woman at the time, it wasn't possible for me to do it. I didn't accept that. I didn't even think about it. I just said, I'm going to go compete in the business world. And I'm going to do the best I can. And I deserve to be here just like anyone else deserves to be here. And I think there's something about that breaks through this gender inequality issue that we all deal with, where you have to still have the confidence in yourself, even when other people no one was hurling abuse at me the way you were getting, but I often felt pushed down and pushed away. So I can imagine.
Yeah, no, I really believe, I learned at a very young age, exactly what you're saying, is that to learn not to listen to the critical opinion of others. And I think that just naturally happened for me, because I will say that my love of playing the hockey or ball or whatever it was greater than my disdain for what was happening to me. And I just felt like I could overcome it in some way. And I think it developed this inner resiliency inside of me that even now, you know, when I'm in medicine, for example, and I'm, you know, hearing the odd comment from senior doctors or people that want to put you in your place, and I kind of laugh it off, whereas other medical students that are here the same thing are just devastated by the comment, and I'm like, oh man, you know, that's nothing compared to what I've been through. So, you know,
yeah, come with me to a hockey game.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I'm grateful for it, but not to say that it wasn't sometimes awful and really hard to hear. I think I learned not to doubt myself, and it's given me confidence to do things like go into medicine later in life and try things that maybe I wouldn't have if I hadn't had those experiences. So, silver lining, I guess, in all the hard times.
Yeah, I know, like I was reading about when you were in Finland, and and I don't know if you want to share the story of where you had to, speaking about what things you had to do, where you had to change. Do you want to talk about where you had to change and what that was all about?
Yeah. So, you know, I had playing professional men's hockey. So it's funny, you know, whether you're playing with 10-year-old boys or 25, 30-year-old boys, they're still the same. And nothing really changed except for obviously playing pro men's hockey. The dynamic was a little different, but I did have my own little referee's room essentially that I would change in, and then I would walk down the hall into the dressing room of the team that I was playing on just before the game would start. And then I would be in the room with the team throughout the game. And then I'd go back into change in the same room at the end of the game. So where I was as a little girl changing, and, you know, as a 14, 15, 16-year-old teenager, changing in my own room didn't change when I was playing pro men's hockey. But there were some interesting times. I remember we went up to a playoff game in northern Finland in a place called Rovaniemi, which is where they actually say Santa Claus comes from. But yeah, and it was a playoff series, and they did not want a girl or a woman playing in this league up there. They were pretty old school. And so my room, when I showed up at the rink, they actually put me in a room where they had cheerleaders in a lot of European leagues. So they had cheerleaders getting ready for the game, and they made me change in the middle of these cheerleaders warming up for the game and all sorts of things. So, you know, the gamesmanship it still carried on even professionally, but it just was a different level, I guess. But you learn to deal with a lot of isolation and a lot of being on your own, I think, through those experiences.
Are you an introvert or are you an extrovert?
Probably an introvert by nature, but my life has forced me to be more of an extrovert. So I think I go out into the world and I do things, but I need my downtime, and I like to be, you know, alone. I'm actually not naturally extroverted, I don't think at all. Probably more of an introvert than anything, but the nature of the beast forces me to have to be out there.
Yeah, I can relate to that big time. I mean, I totally understand what that feels like. But, you know, one of the things the reason I asked the question about introvert versus extrovert is you're very unafraid to call bullshit when you see it. Like, right. And I really appreciate that about you. Like when you see something that's not right, when you recognize that something has to change, whether it's, you know, going to India to help the kids hockey team there, the women's hockey ice team there, or whether it's, you know, what you tweeted just not that long ago to the IOC. I'm curious, like that tweet, that your voice, your ability to stand up and talk about something really started a movement around the world, right? And you did something that took a lot of courage. I mean, people might say, well, it was just a tweet, but maybe just talk about what that tweet was and what motivated you to send it out.
Well, so just for context, I'm a member of the International Olympic Committee. I'm a voting member. So I vote. 180 people in the world get to decide where the Olympics end up, and I'm one of them. And my term is 8 years long, and I was voted in the Sochi Olympics in 2014 from the athletes of the world. And so part of my role is with the Athletes Commission is to advocate for what's best for the athletes of the world. And the IOC is one of the most interesting things to observe, because it's where the highest level of sport meets the highest level of politics and the highest level of corruption all at once. And you're sitting in a room, and you could be sitting beside Princess Anne or Prince of Monaco or the Sheikh of Kuwait, or Stefan Holm, who's an Olympic high jump gold medalist. And, you're just rubbing elbows with some very fascinating people. And it makes for a lot of interesting conversations. But one of the things that the IOC was doing with the COVID-19 was they were saying that we were going to have an Olympic Games in July, this August, in Japan. And I was on the front lines and working in emergency rooms and hearing this dialogue every day. And there's just no way in my mind that we could host an Olympics this coming July. And I just felt like the message from the IOC was very tone deaf. And one of the things that the IOC likes to do is they like to have a unified voice and kind of keep everything in order, and nobody should ever rock the boat, and they know everything. And I was having a hard time just listening to this day after day. So I sent a tweet out that basically said, this is ridiculous and you guys need to wake up. And literally 24 hours later, I received a message from the IOC stating that they weren't happy with how dare I speak out and not ask them for permission first. And, I just am not I go back to, I guess, where I came from. I grew up in a small town, and my family were farmers, and, very low bullshit meter. So they just said it as it was. And that's kind of how I was raised. So I think this, it took a little thought, because when you do things like this, you often, weigh the pros and cons. But I actually made a call to Becky Scott, who Canadians would know as Olympic gold medalist in skiing, but she's been a huge anti-doping advocate and lives in Canmore. And I asked her, and all she said to me was, Hayley, do what would be the right thing for the athletes? And that was all I needed to hear. And I said, no, this is absolutely wrong. You're putting the athletes and the world at risk. And so it was an easy decision in the end. I'm sure, I'm not going to get any Christmas cards from the IOC or any promotion, but I don't really care. I was voted in to do the job, and that's what I have to stay true to. So I think if you take the high road and you speak to the truth, then you can't really go wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a whole I had a lawyer tell me once that, Arlene, you should never fight on principle. You should, because when you fight on principle, you likely are going to lose, because there's going to be facts that, or the judges are going to think about it differently than what your principle matters. And I looked at him, I said, well, if you don't argue and fight on principle, what do you argue on? What is the point? If as you said, if you're not doing the right thing, then what are you doing? You can't just do things to always be with the crowd. I mean, I'm listening to you thinking about what it would be like to sit in that room with all of those people and not feel intimidated in some way, or feel somehow that, like I would sit there and go, well, gee, do I really belong here? And am I good enough to be here? And look at how accomplished they are. But you bring it back down to the reality of the truth, which is, if there's things that are not right or good for the athletes, then it doesn't matter who's sitting around the table and what their power is. You have to be able to stand up and speak for them, because they are the ones who actually voted you in there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember saying to the Secretary General of the IOC, I said, well, history will show who's on the right side of this. And I think history, a few months later, we know where this goes. So I felt really confident. And I also felt like I was educated enough. Like, I had been seeing COVID patients come through the doors of the emergency room. I had polled, several of my doctor friends, and every single person said there's not a chance this can happen. So I felt comfortable in, putting myself out there. And at the end of the day, like, I'm not really enamored by, anyone. I've been around a lot of rich, famous, fancy people, and, some of them are amazing and many of them are so underwhelming. So it just doesn't do it for me to be in those types of rooms. I'm more interested in interesting people and people that are doing the good work. And so I think when you just break it down to, like, what are you there to do? I was elected, I have a job to do, and the athletes are counting on me. And I think looking back, I'm proud. I'm also proud of the way Canada reacted, because we were the first country in the world to say that we weren't going to send athletes to the Olympics in July. And then other countries started to follow suit. And Canada also did the same thing when it came to the anti-doping issue. So I think that we have a very strong moral compass when it comes to international sport in this country, and I'm really proud to be able to say that.
Yeah, there's so much about this country that is good, and I go a little crazy when politics are politics, and people are going to always push back on many things, and it's good to have civil discourse, and I get all that. But I do think that we forget sometimes just how lucky we are to live in a country that does allow us to do the things we need to do. And if I look down your list of accomplishments, Hayley, and I'm guessing you probably don't want to hear the list because I think, but top 100 most influential people in hockey, one of the 25 toughest athletes, one of the top 50 most powerful women in Canada, inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame, elected to the Hockey Hall of Fame, 6-time gold medal winner. The list goes on and on and on. Medical school, but then at the end of it, like now, when I think about you today, and I think about your reinvention as a human and what you're doing, and I think about what you've done with the Conquer COVID-19 campaign, and how you put that together. To me, you've evolved into this person that I respect from just all your accomplishments, and I just look at that list and go, that's just an amazing list of things. But I have a different type of respect for you because you are so engaged in trying to make a difference. And so you made a difference you showed girls who looked at sports what being a woman in sports can be. You helped people to recognize and understand that you can't judge people simply by gender, that you have to allow them to be accomplished and to be all they can be. You didn't limit yourself in terms of your career by saying, I'm only going to be an athlete. You said, I'm going to be not just a athlete, but I'm going to be the best athlete. And I'm going to also now think about medical school. And now you're taking that transition, those dreams you had as a little girl. And I really want to make this point because I believe for people who are listening, this point of what it feels like to be a young child with dreams and hopes and aspirations, especially now when they are getting chased down, that people don't have a lot of hope and people don't feel as hopeful, about their future. Yet you took all of that. You had that as a young girl. You manifested it itself in terms of what you accomplished. And now you've turned that into even more. You're in med school, and now you've created this campaign that has raised millions of dollars to help frontline workers get PPE. And I'd like you to just talk a little bit about what made you do that, because you're in the middle of med school. You're in the middle of like a really grueling schedule with everything you do. Why did you turn your time and attention here?
Well, when you said that you're in the middle, the first word that came to me was hell. The middle of hell.
What the hell are you doing? You're in hell. Why make hell worse? Let me throw some wood on the fire. That's what you decided.
No, thanks for that. I think, honestly, it was a really, it was a very almost an innocent thing. I've been talking to, I was in the emergency room. So I was working for 3 months, and I would go Leafs by day and medicine by night to try to get all my hours in, and some long night shifts and stuff. Started to see COVID patients come in, and then they yanked all of us trainees out of the hospital. And so I was still in contact with a lot of the people I was working with and my friends, and they were saying, oh man, one of my friends in Calgary, she says, geez, I think we only have maybe till the end of the week left for PPE. And then one of my friends in Toronto here, an ICU chief, said, this is a crisis like no other. And so I started to hear all this stuff, and I thought, man, I got to do something to try to get some PPE for the groups of people I knew. And then, so I sent out a tweet, and Ryan Reynolds, who he and I, we got to know each other at the Canada's Walk of Fame, I think 5 or 6 years ago. We were inducted to that thing at the same time, and we were both sitting in the corner saying how much we hate those types of things, talking and those award shows. It's just not our thing. So we kind of bonded over that, and we stayed in touch ever since. And so I guess Ryan saw what I wrote, and he messaged me and said, could I help you amplify that? And 50 million people later, with his reach, here we are. And so he really put it out to the world. And then I was able to connect with this amazing group in Toronto called Conquer COVID, which was a small group of just regular folks that were trying to do the same thing that we were trying to do. And we decided to work together, and through about 100 volunteers, an amazing group of folks, we've been able to sort of mobilize a bit of a movement here, I guess, which has raised, to just over 2 million now. And I think over 1.5 million items have now been delivered, and more orders are happening to, I'll be close to 400 locations across Canada now. So it's been an amazing thing. And honestly, I think with Ryan and I, we just gave it some visibility, and we basically pleaded and we're a voice for all of those that just didn't have the reach that we had. And then the rest is history. It kind of makes me sad in some way that we've had to do this in a country like Canada, which is a have country. I mean, I can't imagine what other countries around the world are facing. Mm-hmm. But so part of me wishes that we didn't have to do this, but part of me is happy because I know that this movement has saved lives, literally. And I've been able to go around and deliver some stuff to different places, and just to see how grateful people are. It's crazy that this has come to this, but this is where we're at. And I think every day is a bit of a adventure, not only for Canadians, but our government. And it's something we've never had to deal with before. So that's kind of how this whole thing came about. And, we've got this t-shirt campaign going with Conquer COVID, which has been fun. And it's now taken on a bit of a life of its own, but it's been great to see. It's just amazing what a bunch of normal folks can do when you mobilize yourself and to try to make a difference. So I'm really proud of these people stepping up.
Yeah, and you make it sound like all you did was send a tweet out, but it was so much more than that, Hayley. Like, it was so much more.
Well, that's how it started.
Yeah. I know you did that, and then you were literally like, I know how hard you worked to raise that group of people together and to make it happen, mm-hmm. and to be visible and present at the drives that you did, and to even to demonstrating how to put helping cashiers figure out how to wear gloves, and taking in stores to help them, giving them tutorials just on the spot on how to safely put gloves on and take them off. I mean, you are just you're so inspiring.
Oh, thanks. I feel like it's part of my duty, though. Like, being in medicine, it's an interesting thing because you take on this responsibility that the Hippocratic oath to do no harm and to help people. And I really felt like in this, if I couldn't be in the hospital where I wanted to be treating patients, then I better be making myself useful. So it was partly that, and I think there's this great joy that also comes with being able to help others. So in doing this, I know that I've also helped myself through a lot of stress and anxiety as well, which I'm certainly not immune to in all of this that's going on.
Starting medical school later in life and doing what you're doing is not easy either. So when you talk about the stress and the load on you, how are you coping right now? What do you do to just get yourself to a place of Zen? Do you meditate? What do you do to try and just get back to center amongst all this?
Yeah. Well, for me, I mean, it's been my life. So, we talked earlier about being physical. So I need to move. I need to train and exercise every day. I wouldn't say it's like an addiction. It's just, it's a need because I physically and mentally feel better. Because with medicine, you sit so much. That's the one thing that I really noticed coming from being an elite athlete to medical school was like, oh my God, are they trying to kill us in the lecture theater, sitting there all day listening? This is horrible. I'm like, this is so anti-medicine. This is terrible. But so I had to find the balance. I actually started standing up in the back of the lecture theater at the U of C and doing all these wild things. But so for me, it's movement. Movement keeps me sane. Training, being outside. I feel like getting sunshine, fresh air. I think I also like to make a schedule every day. I find maybe lots of people feel, it's just you kind of can wake up and it's like Groundhog Day every day. So I like to kind of write out the night before, okay, this is what I need to accomplish tomorrow. Training, getting outside. And then I think you have to give yourself, turn off the phone and the devices. I like to just I play the piano a little bit, so that, and Netflix, and definitely the odd glass of wine or two. I love that too. But staying in contact too. One of the things that's been really hard for me is my son has been in Calgary during all of this. I'm in Toronto, and I mean he's 20. He's he's grown and gone, but I miss my family dearly. So I find the FaceTime and all that stuff, and it does help to be in contact with people as well. It all matters.
Well, I think the advice you just given is very sound advice. I mean, there's a discipline to making sure your days are a little more structured, so you don't just kind of amble through the day and and feel like, as you said, it's Groundhog Day. There's the need to stand and move and exercise. I know for me, my Peloton I say it saved my life. Between the Peloton and the Calm app, I don't know what I'd do if I wasn't doing that. And then walking every day and being outside, the notion of being in touch with nature and getting some vitamin D and being able to at least experience the outdoors right now and in whatever safe way you can, I think is critical. And then keeping in touch with your family however you can so that you don't feel isolated. Those are all really good pieces of advice for anybody who's struggling through this, whether you're, as you said, whether you're an elite athlete, whether you're a medical student, whether you're, a dragon sitting at home, doesn't matter who you are. What you do. You need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself through this because these are very tough times.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The other thing I would say too, Arlene, is that I think sleep is really important, and going to bed at a regular time, getting up at a regular time, those types of things that just keep you in that routine. I think that gives you sort of a semblance of sanity in the days that don't make any sense.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, and I have found that sleep has been it's interesting that people talk about their dreams being so much more vivid, and sleep is just a different type of sleep. But I'm sleeping, for the most part, relatively well. But there's some nights that I wake up and I just don't feel like I'm tired enough. And even though I've worked out, I just don't feel tired enough. And so, there is a need to sleep, and I hope people are keeping and taking care of their mental health, because I can't stress enough how important it is to just monitor yourself and reach out if you need help and talk to people. And I feel really blessed that I get to talk to people like you who make my day better and who make the world better and our country better. And thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure. I've admired you from afar for a very long time. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll talk soon, Hayley. I'm going to be watching you, and I'm not going to go to med school though, just so you know.
Well, don't come see me, not for another few years.
Okay. I will be well.
Okay. Thanks, Arlene.
Bye.
Bye.
It really is incredible how talented Hayley is. I mean, she defines reinvention. She continues to pave new ways and new directions because she sets her mind to it. She seems to be able to accomplish anything she puts her mind to. I have to say it was terrifying to hear about the constant abuse and harassment that she endured playing pro men's hockey. I can relate to that a bit, to being a woman in a male-dominated sphere, and of course it does make you tough and it does make you resilient. But it also makes me wonder how many Hayley Wickenheisers we've lost because they just didn't want to deal with that constant criticism. There are talented women out there who might just say, "What's the point?" Which is why having strong female role models in Canada as part of our national heroes is so important. Hayley looked up to Gretzky and Messier when she was playing hockey, but a younger generation gets to look up now to her. And a young girl who has to make her way in a male-dominated field can say, "I can, because Hayley can." And that is what trailblazing is. Thank you so much for listening. The organization that Hayley mentioned is conqueringcovid19.ca. It's incredible, so please go check it out. Thanks as always to TELUS. Stay safe, everyone, and stay human. This podcast is made possible by the great folks at Venture Communications. Thanks to our engineers, writers, producers, and all the folks who work really hard to bring you these great stories of reinventions each and every week.